My voice is almost out right now. I think I've had strep throat here for a while now. But try to talk if I can. But I'm on my way to look at this F-150. Wow, my voice is real bad. I'm on my way to look at a F-150, 1993. It's got a 5.0 in it, and that's really about all I know about it right now. I've seen pictures of it, and the rear end is out of it. So he's asking $400 for this truck, and I've already found some rear ends in my area. So rear axle, you know that is. So I'm going to take a look at it, and if that's all that's wrong with it, you know, I've heard the motor run and everything, but if the rear axle, rear end is all that's wrong with it, I plan to buy this truck today, and I think it'll make a decent wood hauler. I know it's not a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton, but I'm sure you all have noticed right now the price on everything is up, but trucks are really up right now. So I have been looking around at them. So for now, this will work. You know, as long as I said, the rear end is, you know, the only thing that's wrong with it. That's no problem to change that. That's pretty easy job, really. I did that twice on my Dodge Ram. Wow, my voice. I did that twice on my Dodge Ram, so it's not really a hard thing to do, changing the rear axle. I'm just hoping that's all that's wrong with it. He's saying it is. He's saying the engine's good, the transmission's good, and he didn't really have a lot of good interior pictures or anything, or even of the bed, you know. It's so cheap. And if it is just the rear end, or how I was able to go ahead and find some, when I got interested in buying it, I went ahead and started looking up, you know, trucks around that year, parts trucks in my area, and I found some rear ends, so for decent prices. Like one was for $200, one was $125. So I mean, for possibly $525 to $600, you know, around that, I can have possibly what I'm hoping, a running wood hauler. So we'll see though. All right, here this old Ford is. I didn't get any footage of me getting it towed or anything. I had a tow truck driver deliver it. I went and looked at it up for me, and I was able to listen to the engine, and the engine sounded good. It's a V8 5.0, so that's actually a bigger engine than my Dodge that I had. I mean, it was a V8 too. It had a 4.7, but this truck right here is very similar to the first truck I ever had, my first vehicle ever. When I was 17 years old, my dad bought it for me. It was a Ford F150. It was a 1995. This right here is a 90. But mine was in really good shape, actually. I mean, the inside and the outside and everything was. And mine was a standard 5-speed. This one's an automatic. But mine didn't have as big an engine as this one. Mine had a straight 6 in it. It wasn't as big as this engine. And I know it's a mess in there. That guy had all that in there. None of that's my trash. I may have thrown an L8 bottle in there, but yeah, like the beer bottles and stuff, that's his. I don't drink. But what I'm showing there is how solid the bed is inside. And the interior's pretty rough too. You could tell it seems like they probably use this as a work truck. And I was surprised to see that it had power locks and windows. My 1995 Ford, it had manual windows and locks. It didn't have power ones like that. And I love those old windows like that right there, how you can open them up like that. But anyways, I bought this truck knowing, from what he told me anyways, the only thing wrong with it was the rear end was out of it. And I knew that it would have some minor problems, like maybe brakes or something like that. And as I get into this vehicle later on, I find out some other issues, nothing major that I found out yet. But I'll say more about that later. As you can see, both of those lights work there. And I'm just kind of checking the interior here. It had been home. I think it came the day before this, and this is early the next morning. I went out and kind of looked at it. There's the Ford book it has. That's a 1996. That's a 93, the vehicle. So I'm not sure if that's the original one or somebody just put that in there or what. But anyways, I seen this online, and I knew that if it was just the rear end, that would be an easy thing to change. I changed that twice on my Dodge Ram. It's really not too hard of a job. And I knew that as long as the transmission and engine were good, that if I could put a rear end in it, I'd have me a truck, that I could haul wood around with. And as I said, it's a 5.0, so you could pull a trailer with that easily too. I know it's just a half ton, but still, it's a pretty good size engine and everything. So, and I've never had a truck that had two tanks on it like that before. I don't know if that's two separate tanks or if those both go to one tank. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. I've never had a truck that had that before ever. So I'm not even sure how that works. Some of you all may know. I'm not sure if one runs out, you got another for backup, or if that's both the same tank, which I don't understand why it would be the same tank, because then it wouldn't really make sense. That door right there is in really rough shape. That's something I've got to buy, or I want to buy as a door. As you can see, it's very rough. It doesn't even close. Yeah, it had a bungee cord holding that door shut when they brought it home to me, the tow truck driver. Something that interested me a lot, though, was the tow truck driver told me when he brought it to me, he said, I asked him if he had any trouble getting it on his truck and where the rear end was locked up, and he said it rode just fine. And I said, the rear end rode? And he said, yeah. I said, well, that's odd. He said the guy that you bought it from was standing there and even said, well, it's rolling now. And so I don't know if something I noticed about the truck is the drive shaft was hanging on the ground. And he told me that I bought it from said that the rear end had locked up, and when that happened, the drive shaft had broke. The U-joint did. And the U-joint had broke, and so the drive shaft kind of fell down. And what I believe happened now is that the U-joint just broke. But after I heard that, then I kind of thought to myself, well, maybe it's not the rear end. Maybe if the rear end's rolling, then it must not be the rear end. So maybe his drive shaft just popped off on him and he thought his rear end locked up. Because he said he had it pulled home after that, and then I don't think he'd really messed with it since. And this man had about 5 or 6 other vehicles. And so I kind of believed his story. He was saying that he just didn't really need it, and he had it for quite a while. As you can see, this truck is in pretty rough shape, but I've found some parts trucks near me that are around this same year, one for the door already, and then I'd kind of like to get another seat. But the thing, it starts right up. I mean, no problem. It starts right up. The engine sounds good. As you can see, that vacuum hose there, I noticed that when I lifted the hood, that vacuum hose was unhooked, so I hooked that back in. But it idles pretty good and just sits there running. I mean, when I went and looked at it, he had it running for me when I got there. And I just it ran for probably 15, 20 minutes, didn't overheat or anything like that. The oil pressure was showing good on the gauge. The battery seems to hold a charge. The tires aren't in the greatest shape, I know that. That right there, the belt is kind of rubbing that little, that's like a heater core line right there. The metal one. I noticed that was kind of rubbing it. But as you can see, it's really not in too bad a shape under the hood there. Everything looks like it's where it needs to be and everything, and really not too bad a shape. But as I know it's not a real good looking truck. I don't need a good looking truck for, hauling wood. And I know where an F250 is as well, that I've been interested in actually. And I talked to the man about it. I think it was last night. Well, not last night. It's about, what am I saying? Probably 4 or 5 nights ago, actually. But there's the drive shaft, as you see. See it hanging down there? I think that's what happened to him. And you can see the exhaust is kind of cut off right there, too. There's a guy local here that has an exhaust shop. he does mufflers and stuff like that. He could probably fix that for me. I am planning to maybe, you know, if this truck runs decent and everything, putting a little bit of money into it, honestly. So the frame is solid. The frame is solid on this truck. I checked that because I had a 96 or 97 F-150, and the frame on it was pretty bad. But this frame, I mean, it has surface rust. It does have surface rust, but the frame itself is solid. I looked all over it, and I didn't see any spots that were like rusted through or anything like that. All the tires had the center caps except for one. See, there's the frame. I'm kind of showing the frame there. It is solid. So I was very happy to see that, you know. Some Fords I've noticed, I know I'm sure other trucks too, but some of them, certain years, the frames are bad about rusting, like notorious for it. Certain years. I'm not sure why. And there's probably Dodges and Chevys the same way, I wouldn't doubt. But in my head, you know, I was just thinking, you know, if it's just the rear end, you know, that's not a big deal. $400 for this truck, you know, it's a V8. I can haul wood with this thing, even though I'm wanting a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton. The 3/4 ton I'm talking about, the F250, it's extended cab. And it needs a little bit of work too, but I believe I'm going to get it probably. I really like it. It's in better shape than this truck. And it's a F250 and extended cab and everything. See, it's not in there. The dash is kind of rough right there, kind of broken. But that was to the fuel tanks. It said front and rear or something like that. Look at my little latch here. Fancy little latch right on the seat belt. Look at that custom door latch. Wonder how many people got a door latch like that. It reminded me a lot of mine though, but there's where the U-joint broke. You can see pieces of it there still in that flange there. See how it broke. And the more I looked at it and observed it, I was thinking, this guy's thinking his rear end locked up, and what happened was this U-joint just broke, and then the drive shaft dropped, and it probably was rubbing the road, and he probably thought, well, his rear end locked up, you know. I noticed the oil pan there had you can see it's leaking oil. I'm guessing it needs a new gasket, oil pan gasket. So that's something I plan to do later on, is put a new oil pan gasket, you know, change the oil filter, and but the frame itself, there it is again, it is solid. As I said, there's some surface rust here and there, but that's it. That's really as far as that goes. So it seems to me this year anyways, or at least this particular truck, the frame is in pretty good shape, which I was very happy, because, I mean, even if you got a good engine and all that stuff, and your transmission, you fix things on it, and you've got a bad frame, but it's really, maybe there are ways to fix the frame and kind of rig it up to where, you know, it'll work, but I'd definitely prefer a solid frame, especially hauling firewood. You know, that's something I don't need a bad frame in. Which nobody needs a bad frame, period. What I'm showing here is just the oil that was leaking there. And now here I jack the truck up, the rear end back here, and I spin these tires to see if it's locked up, and as you can see here, it's not.
Yeah.
Spinning just fine. I mean, if the rear end was locked up, it would not be doing that. I had the rear end lock up in my Dodge Ram while I was driving it with a loaded trailer, double axle trailer in Lexington. I just got off an exit, and it's so surprising the way it happened. I just got off this exit and I had a vehicle behind me too, and the rear end had been making noise for a while, but I mean, this day I noticed it had got worse on the interstate, and then when I got off the interstate, I made it from Mount Sterling all the way to Lexington, which is about 40-minute drive. And I went around the curve, and then there was like a little curve to my left there that kind of separated the lane that I was in from the lane on the other side. And there was only one little spot that you could pull through there. And it just so happened that my rear end locked up right in that spot. And I mean, it locked up tight. It was like I slammed my brakes on it, and it was and I looked in my mirror real fast, and that vehicle behind me had to swerve to keep from hitting my trailer. I'd never had that happen before, you know, rear end lock up on me. And so, but right where it happened at, I was able to, even though it locked up, when I gave it gas and pushed it hard, it would go. It was just really hard for it to go. So I made it go and pull it off just enough to keep from getting hit by that vehicle. In that one little spot there where a vehicle could fit through, out of that whole road there, it locked up on me right in the spot to where, you know, I could get my vehicle in at. Thank goodness. Otherwise, I would have been pulling over a curb, and with it locked up like that, I don't even know if it would have went over it. I had to have it towed that day, but hopefully that never happens again. I've had some dangerous things happen, you know. I've had the lugs on my truck before, my Dodge, and a Ford F-150. I was on the interstate one time on F-150, and every lug on my truck broke. At every one of them. I had no lugs to hold the tire on. The only thing that kept that tire on was the weight of the truck. It was wobbling horrible, and I was thinking, what in the world has happened? I pulled over on the side of the road. My brother was with me. I think we had a load of wood, and that's what did it. That's why you really need a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton, because of stuff like that. I mean, those lugs, there was so much weight in that bed that it broke the lugs off. And I did the same thing with my Dodge Ram before. I was on my way to deliver wood to a guy, and was almost to his place, and it happened. Completely broke the. I had two holding it that day, 2 lugs, and I think I made it home on those. I was almost to his place. I delivered the wood, and I drove home on the back roads, if I'm not mistaken, and made it home like that with 2 lugs and lug nuts. So yeah, it's very dangerous. That's why, like, if you ever do have any broken lugs, because I've drove like that many times myself, like to where I don't even have all my lugs in there. There may be 5 lugs on my Dodge, you know, and I may be driving on 4 because one of them's broke off or something. And when you're hauling firewood, you need every lug you've got, really, especially when you got rails on there like you've seen me do. And so it's really better to just have a 3/4 ton or a 1 ton or a trailer even. Make sure you got trailer brakes. Because if not, that trailer, especially in a 1/2 ton truck, it's going to pull you around when you've got weight on it. But here's the U-joint. I know I've been talking a lot about other things. Here's the U-joint, and that's a pretty easy repair. This is the second time I've ever repaired a U-joint. I did it on my Dodge as well. It's really not a lot to it. As you can see, I had a socket, and you want the socket to just fit inside that flange, as you see there. You don't want to hit the flange. If you hit that flange and damage it, your clips probably won't stay in there. There's little clips that go in there, and those are what keep your U-joint in, those clips right there. And they're hard to get in. For me, they were. Maybe if you have a pair of needle nose pliers, like those pliers right there are kind of like needle nose, but where they got that curve, it was just, they wasn't working the greatest. I was able to get it in, and then I as you can see there, I got a little extension and kind of hammered it in the rest of the way, and then it just slid right in. And the thing is, they've got a little groove for those to go in. And when they go in that groove, they'll actually sink in. You'll actually see them go in to this groove. If you don't see them go into the groove and you see the whole clip, then it's not in, right? And all you got to do, if that's the case, it's not deep enough down in there. Your U-joint isn't. So you just put that socket on top, which I'll show you here later. You put your socket on top and kind of beat it down in there until you see that clip expand and sink into the groove. Once it sinks into that groove, you know it's in there good. If you don't get in that groove, there's a good chance it may pop off on you while you're driving and that U-joint come off. You don't want that happening. As you see right here, though, here's what I was talking about. Just get your socket, if it's not sunk in, and keep hammering it until you can kind of feel it sink in, and then you can see it too. See right there how it's kind of in the groove now? That's what you want. But in my head at this point, you know, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you know, the guy told me the rear end was locked up. I know now that the rear end isn't locked up. So hopefully this is the problem. Hopefully this is definitely a problem, but hopefully this is what the issue is for it to not be driving. And I was thinking to myself, you know, if this is all that it is, you know, then that's great. And then once I get it going, then I'll see if it has any more issues, you know. Are the brakes bad? How's the power steering? How bad is the suspension and everything on it? But the first thing was this. I knew this was an issue. I just didn't know if this was the issue keeping it from driving, you know. I knew this was an issue, and it made sense to me that it would, because I've had it happen before to me in my Dodge, the drive shaft break off like that. And I knew it wouldn't drive. So I was thinking to myself, you know, I'll get this on, and if it drives, there we go, $400. And the U-joint, I think, was maybe $25, $30. So if I say $430 or so, I've got a driving work truck running and driving work truck. And here I'm putting the bolts in. They're 12 millimeter, these bolts are. You need a 12 millimeter wrench. And they were pretty tough to break off, but I just used a wrench and then put another wrench on it to create some leverage, and was able to pop it off like that. Now I've got the drive shaft in, and from here I'll let you see the rest.
See how it does now. Got the drive shaft in it.
Okay, ready? Yep.
Sissy, look up.
Let's see what it can do.
Can I look at the camera?
Put it forward, Carter.
Okay, you guys, let's go see how this works. We're driving. It works pretty good, you guys. Pretty good, huh? This thing is like good driver.
Something about it that has no power steering, pretty much. So that's something I discovered, but I got it going. See? Yeah.
So, you guys, we got this vehicle, and it is very old. But it still works pretty good. Its wheels still work. Yeah,
Woohoo! Dad, better hold your door.
The baby. B. Oh. Hey, what you doing? Yeah, what are you doing in here?